I can't hire everyone, right? Like we have multiple stores, everything else. So part of that is having my store managers really know what it is we're looking for and how to staff the stores and how important that is. So it has to be infectious. It has to be part of one of those things that my store managers need to know exactly what it is we're looking for and how to recognize that.
What's going on, dispensary owners? In this episode, I'm joined by Richard McLean. He's the head of retail for Vibe by California. They're vertically integrated and they have 5 locations in California and 1 in Portland. He's an absolute wealth of information. We talk about many things such as how he deals with managing multiple stores, what he looks for in both his management and front-facing staff, and then how he goes about dealing with the uncertainty in the cannabis space. You're not going to want to miss it. I'll see you over there. Richard, thanks for hopping on the Dispensary Marketing Podcast.
Glad to be here, Brandon.
Awesome. So what are your keys to running a successful dispensary?
Well, I think the first key is really about service. That's one of the things that's going to keep your customers coming back. It's one of the things that I think all of us, it doesn't matter where you shop or what you're doing. It's really about the service or lack of service, right? If you go somewhere with horrible service, that's all you're going to take away. It's all you're going to remember. You may not even remember what you bought, but you're going to remember how horrible that service was. Or it's going to be a shining star and you're going to be like, I met the best bartender today. She was so funny, right? So it's really about service. It's about knowledge. Like, our customers specifically are coming in for a purpose, whether it's something to get away from their normal day-to-day, if it's actually pain management, whatever it is, they have a plan in mind of why they came in. And we need our bartenders to be knowledgeable about what we're doing, right? And the last part is passion. Like your bartenders really have to have passion and be excited about being there and doing what they're doing. Otherwise, it doesn't help anyone, right? It really shows. I think one of the main differences in the shopping experience between the people that you really enjoy and what's really going on is passion and that level of passion. And if they come in and they're excited about seeing you and they're excited about helping you, you are excited about being there and you're excited about being helped.
Right. There is a level of reciprocity of energy, right?
Absolutely.
If somebody comes to you and says, oh, hey, Richard, how's it going? Or, hey, Richard, how's your day going? Right? It makes a world of a difference, even though the words are the exact same. The delivery is the thing that kind of makes the change.
Absolutely. That passion is everything.
Right. Very quickly on the service part, because I know, again, after interviewing a ton of people, service is probably one of the main keys, I think, across the board that everyone mentions as one of the keys, right? What does service mean to you, though? How do you parse having good service between a good job and a bad job?
Well, I think, like I said, part of it is when you hire, you really need to look for people that have passion for what they're doing. I think you can train people on service, but you can't train them on the will to be there or liking people, right? So you really have to hire those people that want to be there and are excited about your customers and are excited about helping and being helpful. And in this case, like cannabis, even if they've never smoked cannabis, they have to be excited about it. They have to have a passion for it and they have to be storytellers. Right. And if you don't have those pieces, it's really going to show.
Right. So during the hiring process, right, is that something that is more of a gut feeling? Is it like an SOP that you give to a hiring manager? Kind of like, how do you really figure out like the passion of a person who is just passionate about trying to get the job versus the passion of actually taking that passion into, their day-to-day work?
Well, I think personally, so first of all, I can't hire everyone. Right? Like we have multiple stores, everything else. So part of that is having my store managers really know what it is we're looking for and, how to staff the stores and how important that is. So it has to be infectious. It has to be part of one of those things that my store managers need to know exactly what it is we're looking for and how to recognize that. The second part is we are free to ask a lot of questions that you may not get in a traditional relationship or traditional interview, right? My favorite things to do is to start with the question, so tell me about your relationship with cannabis. And I like us to be excited about the question and talk about our relationship with cannabis. And suddenly I think that kind of takes the edge off and you can start to listen to them talk about cannabis and their passion behind it, and you start to see what type of stories they have, right? Like, so tell me about your relationship with cannabis. Oh my goodness. Like, my first time getting high, I had this great, relationship. I've enjoyed it. Or I really didn't believe in cannabis at first, but I really had these pains or I had these problems in my life. And it really has changed my life. You hear so many wonderful stories that you connect with when you are doing these interviews. And it's just so inspiring. And if you aren't feeling that inspiration, if they are basically just telling you they're here because they need something to pay their bills, that's not the right hire.
Right. Absolutely. And I get an inkling of that because, before I do a lot of these interviews, we do have a pre-call, right? And a lot of times when I have the chat and I say, hey, tell us how you little get started, just a brief interview, right? Not an interview, but just a brief introduction between the two. There's like this subconscious smile that people have just kind of talking about their story, what they really like doing. And I'm like, boom, bang, this is going to be a really nice episode because as you mentioned before, the delivery, the passion of how somebody speaks, it goes a long way. And I think it's even more important virtually too, right? Because, still 2D, as much as we're on the Zoom culture and all that stuff, the energy that you get from, in person is absolutely different. So being able to at least translate at least a fraction of that charisma, goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Kind of transitioning very well into my next question. How did you get started into this space? How did you get to where you are right now? I'm assuming you didn't, say, hey, boom, I want to start in the cannabis, boom, come out and do all that stuff.
It wasn't actually my plan. Originally, I did a lot of high-end boutique retail sales, and it was COVID. Because during COVID, all of the normal retail outlets kind of shut down, as the rest of the world kind of did. And I was just in a place, I'm not someone to sit idly. It was really making me crazy. I was going stir crazy. I needed something to kind of fill that space. Mm-hmm. And I applied for a few different things. And when I saw the cannabis opportunity, I had a relationship with cannabis a large part of my life, but it was never where my two worlds met, right? Like my retail career and my cannabis knowledge were always kind of separate. And I was really afraid to bring those two things together originally. And I was really, theoretically, my retail knowledge should be able to transfer into cannabis, but will it? Right? And it's not until you cross that door, that threshold, that you start to realize exactly how similar they are and how much cannabis right now in its infant stage really needs that leadership of retail.
Right. So what would you say did translate well from your previous experience and what maybe didn't translate so well?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So I think the cannabis space in general, there's a lot of the pay matrix, KPIs, costs versus sales, all those bits that we know with my eyes closed. Like, it's something that I've done my entire career that I can tell you about, I've trained the classes on, that is still kind of a new idea in cannabis. When I first came in, my store managers, I asked them what their weekly sales were, and they had no idea. I asked them what their average ticket value was. They had no idea because, yeah, exactly. The KPIs are totally a lost concept on them. And so I think bringing some of that in where they understand the relationships between those KPIs and how they work together without sacrificing your service, right? Mm-hmm. Because the whole thing is, just because you understand sales doesn't mean that we are suddenly being mean to our clients or that we're only looking for money or we're now corporate and money grubbing, right? Those two things can go together. Like, we can introduce products to our customers and show them the full scope of what we can offer them without making it feel like or look like all we're after is their money.
Right.
And then as far as the other end of it, things that I may have brought that may have been too much, there's some definite professionalism in upper scale retail, the suit, the tie, all those bits, the air. And that's kind of menacing in the cannabis space. They really didn't like it very much. It made people nervous.
A little bit intimidating.
A little bit intimidating, right? And so you kind of dress it down a little bit, and you come in jeans and a polo, and you try to be approachable. Yeah. And so I think that there's some of that corporate ease and some of the language and stuff that I had to learn to walk away from a little bit to become more relatable.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to kind of talk about your KPIs, it is difficult, right? Because you want specific metrics so that you can hit specific goals. But just because you hit those goals in the short term doesn't mean it aligns with the goals of the company over the long term, right? Where if you want to hit weekly sales goals, you're going to fight tooth and nail to hit those. But does that necessarily mean you're going to hit the KPIs that you want a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, right? And another conversation that I'm increasingly having is saturation in the space and all that stuff, right? Cannabis still being a commodity, really the biggest difference is the service, the branding that you have, right? And if you now come across as a brand that is always hard selling all the time, sure, it might not bite you in the butt immediately, but over the course of the long run, they realize that, okay, this is probably not a dispensary that I want to go to, right? So it's really tricky kind of balancing those. So I guess my question back to you is, how do you balance the short-term KPIs with the long-term KPIs and make sure that you can have alignment with the bud tenders who may or may not be as long-term driven as, let's say, the C-suite people, but then you also need them to make sure that they hit the specific numbers that they're looking for?
I think more than anything, what you kind of have to learn to do is have a kind of a target method where you have a outside framework of what you need to see and what you want to do. And then you can tighten up a little bit more as far as practices and SOPs, but you never want to get it as tight as you might for a retail organization, because you need the ability to shift and move along with the things that are happening in the space, right? Because like you were saying, like, it's really hard to set long-term goals because we don't know what's going to happen in the space in 6 months. And it's still so new, and we don't have the data and the tried and true things that we have in a lot of the other retail spaces, right? So you have to give yourself that extra space to be able to maneuver. You have to be able to revise those budgets according to trend. So much more than setting like year-long goals, you kind of have a larger, less tuned in goal at the end, and then you revisit it every month, every 90 days, and you rework it for trend, and you just keep open lines of communication,
right,
and work towards that end goal. And I think that the transparency with the bud tenders and with your management is one of the largest factors, because when you let them know, hey, this is what the goal is, this is what we're trying to do, and we are all working on this together, it is such a different dynamic than having a goal that you forgot to tell anyone about, and then you're mad when you didn't achieve it.
Right. Which is the worst outcome for sure. Would you say you're someone that more so thrives in this uncertainty, where you like enjoy the changes, or would you say you're somebody who kind of enjoys more of a routine, more sustainability? Well, I guess even answering that question, you're in the cannabis space, so it's like you don't really have an option, right?
Right. Well, I would prefer more structure. However, you work with what you got.
Yeah. For sure. So what are your biggest challenges and struggles right now?
Part of it, I guess the largest part is the economy.
Sure.
So we created this kind of weird artificial bubble in the cannabis space with COVID. And so what happened was there's always a spike when you first hit legalization in a state, right? Because everyone's so excited they can finally get high for legally. And so there's a spike of excitement. But before that spike in California could really reach its bell curve and really understand what the actual normal numbers are going to be after the excitement, we hit COVID. And everything else, people couldn't go outside, they couldn't see their grandparents, they couldn't do anything else, but you could get high. Because we were considered a necessary field, being that it's considered medical. So people were getting paid from the government to stay home, and the only thing they could really do is get high. So we have people that maybe got high when they were kids, and now have been adults that didn't have anything else and weren't worried about getting drug tested next week, and so suddenly they could sit on their couch and get high again. And so we saw record profits in the cannabis industry. But then when everyone started having to go back to work, it was a very sharp decrease. And not only did everyone have to go back to work and less people had the time and all of that, but the economy suffered because of COVID. And unfortunately, cannabis is more of a need. I'm more of a want than a need. You know, if your choices are putting gas in your car or, you know, getting high today, right? Like, you know, there are certain choices you have to make. And so for a lot of people, it's not the priority. And unfortunately, the market's really feeling that right now.
Right.
And then on top of that, we are taxed higher. That's, I think, one thing that a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people think that the cannabis space is just printing money.
Yeah.
But almost 30% of my profit goes towards taxes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate, I mean, blessing and a curse, I would say, because COVID also allowed other markets to have some of that, you know, positivity about like, hey, like, well, if it's working in California, then, you know, maybe we can open up, right? And again, now we're talking about the short-term, long-term KPIs and like, is it good long-term or short-term? I think TBD, but you hit it bang on the head. And I say this all the time. It's like whenever a state, city, whatever it is, goes legal, there's a massive influx. The novelty is still there, right? And I would love to talk to you about the novelty with employees. We'll get to that in a second, but the novelty of cannabis is still there. Opportunity is there. When opportunity strikes, people are going to open up businesses. When people open up businesses, more people are going to go. Market saturation hits, and then you know, a little correction, right? So I think it's really interesting to see across states. You know, New York is kind of going through that right now. We're going to see kind of what happens with that. And we'll see what happens to a lot of these states. But kind of going into that whole novelty aspect, right? A conversation that I've been having with a couple of these other owners is employees, right? And you mentioned it before, where it's like the passion for the plant, let's say, and there's a level of novelty to working in the cannabis space. And then after a while, they're like, well, it's still a customer front-facing job where you have to deal with people who are nice and not so nice, right? Are you experiencing that same thing with the, you know, the employees and the teams, I guess, that you manage up above? Or is this something that you're able to kind of deal with over time by, you know, kind of just reinvigorating the team with whatever incentives?
That's an interesting question that doesn't have just one answer. So there's a few factors that are all moving on in the employment phase right now. Part of it is coming from legacy cannabis.
Right.
Legacy cannabis, there were a lot of people that were getting paid in weed. There was a lot of people that, you know, they were being paid cash at the end of their day every day, right? Like, we didn't have any stable way of doing business yet. And so after legalization, and as things are becoming more and more retail, we're starting to see a change in the employment and the employees, because we're starting to want and need more. Because not only do we need employees that are very highly educated about cannabis and its needs, wants, and all those bits, but they also now need to be salespeople, because you know, as the retail aspect of things come in, and it's going away from being kind of that knowing your dealer background, you know, style transaction to you know, knowing your favorite cashier when you come into your retail space. And so it really changes, like you were talking about, like your front facing, this is a retail job, but it's trying to find those people that still have passion for the plant, still have passion for their customers and wanting to help, but aren't just there to pick up because originally I think a lot of the legacy bud tenders were there because it wasn't a hard job and there wasn't a lot of accountability behind how they did their job. You know, they could be mean to a customer, they could do anything else. Because I think there was a kind of a mindset during legacy that you are lucky that we're here, right? And so if the customer did something wrong, it's like, you know what, we're just going to 86 you. Like it was very much the business was in control of the customer experience.
Right. Go find somebody else.
Go find somebody.
You know, you couldn't just look on Google and find, you know, your local dealer. You had to ask somebody and ask, it's like, hey, you got me, or, you know, nothing else, right?
Absolutely. And so I think that as things have through legalization and with, like you said, all the saturation, because now they can go somewhere else,
Yeah.
right down the street. And so how do you keep those customers and how do you keep them happy? And it's really about that retail experience, but in a professional way, and something that is sustainable and that our customers want and expect from us.
Right. So it's clear you're a retail master. You're able to kind of set up a new location, get everything sorted, make sure the right people are in place, make sure, that whatever the shelves and everything is good, right?
Right.
Now, you guys are responsible for a lot of locations. How do you make sure that the level of quality that you bring in from the initial get-go is continually sustained, not just at, like, let's say the single location, because we had this discussion before,
right.
A single mom and pop shop where the owner is still kind of like front facing, they go into work into that specific location every day. If somebody shows up late, then they can kind of sub on in and say, well, this person's sick, I can kind of man the cashier and do that sort of thing.
Right.
Obviously, it's not the same for what you guys are, have going on, right? So what are and I might not even be asking the right question when it comes to this, but what are like the processes, the SOPs? Is it the people you put in place to ensure that this level of quality continues, over the course of the long run, with or without you directly being in the store?
I think you're asking the right question, but I think my answer might surprise you a little bit.
Sure.
So it's really about keeping a solid management group. And so what it is all of my store managers, I have a meeting with my store managers over Zoom every Tuesday. They know I'm going to be there. They know that we can talk about whatever's going on. They know I'm going to be transparent about numbers, figures, whatever's going on in the business. And then I also do one-on-ones with them once a week.
Right.
So they have these forums. They know the expectation. If I got a bad review about their stores, then during their one-on-one, we're going to talk about that. And then I also do store visits. And I generally see the stores probably every other week.
Okay.
So I really rely on those store managers to hold the vision, but it's up to me to give them the vision and then to hold them accountable to that vision, right? So it's about fostering that. I find it really easy if you set all your expectations up front and you set that culture, right? You make it part of the culture. Like, this is what a vibe store looks like. This is what it should feel like. These are all the aspects. And once they fully understand that dream, then it makes it really easy for them to know what the guide rails are. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard them say things like, oh, well, then I told them Richard wouldn't like that, because they see this like my vision, my dream.
Yes,
but the thing is, they're the ones policing that dream.
Yeah.
And so it really is about creating that culture, creating that value. So everyone down to your bud tenders really know what the expectation is. And if they're not doing it right, generally they're the first ones that can tell you, it's like, yeah, I could have done that differently, or I should have done that better.
But before we continue, if you're listening to this podcast, then you're probably interested in learning how to better market your own dispensary. I've got the perfect thing for you. Every Monday, I release a completely free newsletter where I send out advanced marketing and SEO strategies sent directly to your inbox. These strategies are a little bit too advanced, so I don't normally post it on social media because it can come across as a bit boring, but these strategies will significantly push your dispensary forward in ways that you couldn't even imagine. If this is something that you're interested in, please check out the links in the description below. You can sign up for the newsletter. It's completely free. It's designed to be read and consumed in 4 minutes or less, and you can unsubscribe at any time. So if you hate it, and if you hate me, you can go ahead and leave. I'll see you there. Go check out the links in the description below. The level of criteria you're looking for out of your bud tenders is the same as the ones you're looking for out of your store managers, because my perspective is that you can maybe have a store manager that is maybe less passionate, maybe a couple points less passionate, but they're really good at kind of making sure things are aligned. Not saying you're going to have a dictator store manager or anything like that. Obviously, you need to have somebody that is charismatic at the same time and can lead people. But, is that your same criteria for the store managers as well?
Not exactly. It does follow. However, I think whenever you talk about corporate cannabis, I'm probably giving you the secret to the punch here, but the idea is from the corporate side down to the front door, should all be corporate. That's where we're talking about KPIs. That's where we're talking about budgets. But once you hit that threshold of the store, that needs to feel legacy, and it needs to have the feeling and look and engagement that our customers demand it or want it to be.
Right.
And so your store managers are kind of a liaison between those two worlds. And they need to understand KPIs, but they also need to understand the culture, and every store is completely different. My store in Reading is nothing like my Stockton store. They look different. There are things where you can definitely tell by the branding and everything that they are the same stores, but they are cousins, not sisters. Like they have a lot of the same things going on, but the vibe in them is completely different because the people we service are very different.
Right.
And so it's really up to my store managers to be able to understand that and to hold that expectation of their store and create that dream and pass that on to their team and be able to translate that into the corporate needs that we need as far as dollars and cents and all this as well.
Right. One of the key things to getting those dollars and cents is marketing, right?
Right.
And a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about is more so once the customer's through the door, how do we make sure they keep on coming back, right? Say hello at the door, make sure you provide them good information. You don't provide the wrong information.
Right.
What would be, kind of your general marketing mix to bring in those new customers?
So that's always rough. Unfortunately, the cannabis space, there's a lot of things we are legally not allowed to do. And even more so, more restrictions per district that you're in. In one district, I might be able to have something like a joint in someone's hand, but it can't be lit or something like that. And then I can not have it at all in a pictured representation in a different place. So some of the strongest things that we use are social media. Social media is a very fickle beast, and you have to make sure that you don't show like any drug sales or anything else on there.
Yeah,
but being also
the
absolutely. But a lot of people I call it trichome porn. We need to be able to show the product and get people excited about what we're selling. We need to be able to show lifestyle pictures and show the types of people so that people can relate with and be like, yeah, I'm that girl. Like, I want to be that. I want to go there. A CRM is very important. Being able to get your message out there in email and text blasts, things like that, so that you're getting that message out so that you're bringing those customers back in. And then the strongest marketing tool that anyone has in the cannabis space is word of mouth. And that legitimately still comes back from the legacy, like when you did have a dealer and everything else, right? Like, exactly. So you have your friends that are like, oh my God, this is so good. Where did you get it?
Yeah.
And that's what you do, is you provide a really good product and a really good experience. And then when your friends are sitting around the circle, passing around a pipe, talking about the product and talking about their experience, I went in and this guy, made me so upset. Oh, you should come to my shop. They're always so nice there, right? Word of mouth is 50% of your marketing right there, which is why it is so important that they have a great experience and the best product.
Right. On the metrics side, because I know you were more of the overviewer, right? And then you translate again the corporate KPIs to the transitionary people, and then the transitionary people to obviously the front-facing legacy people.
Absolutely.
Front, right? So there's the obvious metrics, profit, revenue, total sales, and stuff like that. But is there anything else that you just kind of keep your eye on just to make sure things are trending in the right direction?
A lot of that is just it's the math so that you can speak to what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So it's top and bottom line sales. Sales are always there's an old saying, sales forgives all sins. So if you're making your sales, if you're making your numbers, you're doing something right.
Right.
Average transaction value, UPT, and foot traffic, the three of those kind of work together so that you're able to kind of see what's going on in your stores, right? So if your foot traffic is down, but your average basket size is up, then you know that your bud tenders are doing their best, right? Mm-hmm. To really maximize on those sales. If your units per transaction are down, but your foot traffic is up, then do we have the right mix in the store? Or do we have the things
Right.
our customers are shopping for, right? So understanding how these KPIs work together is more important about understanding the story. But one thing that I always train all managers on, reporting and KPIs have already happened. They help us project the future, but they are not the answer. It's taking those ideas and going to look for those answers that are important for us.
Right. So, as we're kind of nerding out on numbers, I have a quick follow-up question on this, just my own curiosity. So I know in this space, there's like tons of uncertainty, market saturation, all that stuff, right? So there's dispensaries opening up left, right, and center, people doing grand openings, undercutting costs and stuff like that, right? Just grand opening, get whatever, you're 30% off, and then there's also things like where you yourself, or not you yourself, but you, the company, is offering also different deals. So 420 deals, I don't know, Valentine's Day deals,
Right.
Black Friday deals, Green Wednesday deal, whatever it is, right? How do you filter out that level of noise to make sure that, again, like the KPIs are being hit, but let's say you have a competitor opening up down the street, right? And then it's like, oh, well, I'm not sure what happened there, and you might not even know. Do you kind of take this data over like a longer term period where you say, okay, over the course of the last 3-ish months, or hey, we did this really good deal, so our sales got artificially kind of increased and stuff like that? Like, how do you kind of like sift through all these data points with so many other variables happening besides, foot traffic and all that stuff?
Well, there's a few answers to that. So first of all, I rely on my store managers to know what's going on in their areas, right? So like if a new store just opened up, they need to be in touch with that, and they need to know, hey, by the way, there's a Lemonade that just opened up down the street, so that we can then watch for those sales trends and be reactive to them as needed. It's their stores. That's where they live. It's their towns. It's their cities and their communities. And the cannabis space, for as big as it is also very small. And so a lot of your customers will come in and talk to your bud tenders. Oh yeah, I went to that Lemonade that opened down the street, and they're going to tell you the goods and the bads. And you need to stay receptive to that information and be able to pivot. And I think a lot of that, the answer to the underlying question of what you're asking is, how do you sustain through those changes? And what it really comes down to is consistency. If you have a really great deal, but your service is bad, or they can't always get the product they're looking for whenever they come back there, how many times are you going to go back to a store and after the second or third time they don't have what you're looking for? I'm just not going to go there again.
Yeah.
So it's about consistency of product. It's about consistency of service. I will tell you, I have had plenty of times where other dispensaries temporarily offer a better deal or something's going on, and we can see a small dip in numbers for a minute. But as the excitement wears off from there, they're going to come back to where they feel the best connection. They're getting the best service, and they're getting the best bang for their buck. And what I always tell people is, our stores, we try to run it, I always tell them as a kind of place of understanding, we will always be the Target of weed. We are never going to be the Walmart of weed, right? Because we want to keep that higher bar where we're still a reasonable discount location, and people are coming here and they know what the prices are and they know what to expect, but we're never going to lower ourselves to this standard and be a blowout store or do any of these things. And I find that most of the stores that do that don't stay around long, because the reason that they had those prices is because they either had really old product, or they were doing some artificial things with their numbers temporarily, or selling product that wasn't very good.
Right. Stick true. And again, this kind of goes back to the long-term, short-term stuff, right? If you're always trying to do short-term, race to the bottom, then that's not a recipe for a good business at all.
Yeah.
So on the dispensary side, do you have your eye out, maybe not more so on a competitive sense, but just more so on a curiosity sense, like any other dispensaries that have come out that have caught your eye? Anybody else that you see out there that's, you think is, doing it really well?
I have two really good competitors that I really enjoy watching.
Yeah.
Just for their reach and what they have going on. I really admire Nug. They have well-packed stores. They're doing a really good job in their growth. Cookies for a while was doing a good job, but they weren't really doing a cannabis space job as much as they were doing a really good job rebranding people
Yes.
and taking these
The
smaller
influencer route.
and just painting them blue and calling them cookies, right?
Yeah.
And but as far as a business model, my favorite out there still is Airfield Supply. And that's just because they have done such a great job of getting as many people through their door and out happily with the product they need in hand than almost everywhere else. And so I really admire their business model and the way that they've put it together. I don't think it works for every market because I think that different markets require different things. Like I said, smaller towns, smaller stores like my Reading location, those people are very used to coming in and telling you about their entire day, and they're regulars, and all all about their aunt and their dog, and they really require that like almost friendship level. And then you have other stores, the larger stores with higher volumes, and those people just don't want to wait, right? They just don't want a huge line. They want to be in and out with their product. I got places to be, things to do. I have a party this weekend. I just need my stuff. So you really have to be able to read the room.
Right. And I mean, I think that's one of, just based on the, short time we've been having this conversation is the customization of each location, despite it still being corporate, right? And I think that's where a lot of people do the big miss, right? It's like, you can still be a branded location, but offer custom service to that specific location, right? Some places do want more of that slower paced, mom and pop shop feel.
Absolutely.
I want to know the people who I'm buying from. I want to take my time. This is more of a social outing as well as a purchasing experience. And then there's other places where high hustle and bustle. I want my stuff right away. I don't want to wait. I need to get in, as you say, get in and get out, right? And I think just based on the conversation we were having, like the fact that you're even bringing that up, it sounds like you're doing an amazing job. So good stuff.
Thanks.
Now, on learning, right? So you came from a different industry, of course, right? And I'm sure you learned a lot just by doing the thing, lots of ups, lots of downs. But do you have any favorite resources that you like to learn from? Best YouTube channels, books, mentors, or anything like that?
Truthfully, though, I told you that the legacy space came from the people that and the connections you made. And I think that the learning is kind of the same. It's really finding the people in the space. Some of the best learning I've had come from some of the smaller shops that we have. I have a group of people I work with called the People's Ecosystem, and they are all about diversity and a lot of social equity. And the social equity shops have taught me so much about the root behind the cannabis community and what people, what the history has been and what the fight has been in legalizing cannabis. And it's important to know those things because we're all operating within a community. And it's kind of like being at family dinner where you can inadvertently say something and upset your cousin, and it's kind of the same thing as we're all in this together and we're all working on this together. And we need to make sure that we're not stepping on anyone's toes and that we're all working as a unit to try and push this through, because if we do this as a community, we're going to succeed as a community. But if we are fighting each other and doing all this interplay, like I said, at Thanksgiving dinner, it's not productive and it makes it harder for the people who are on the front lines rallying and making legislation and doing things to help legalize and make this no longer a dirty little secret or anything else, and make this an everyday part of people's lives. And I have done a lot of learning, like I said, from those communities. Also, other store managers. There are events that we go to like MJ BizCon's just about to come out, and I think that being able to connect with the community, and not just the other dispensaries, but like the farms and the ancillaries, the label makers, the people that create the jars, like all of these different people that are entrenched in the cannabis community. It's understanding all of the things that make their businesses run and how to make everyone's jobs easier and how to stay off of each other's feet as we're trumping through this.
Yeah, it's, kind of being in the trenches. I think it's really important. And I've done also my fair share of interviews with, kind of the store managers, purchasing managers and stuff like that. And just being in the day-to-day operations of literally in the store, dealing with everything that's going on, I think it's super, super important. And again, just not to, kind of keep tooting your horn, but there's not a lot of people, I don't think, in your position who's just kind of not saying that you only oversee, but in the overseeing position to kind of make sure that those KPIs are good. That also takes the time to make sure that they still do the in the trenches work, right? Because it's very easy to just be someone here saying, hey, store managers, this is what should be happening. And then, let them do the communication between the two and call it a day. But making sure that there is a level of understanding, I think, again, just pushes everything, forward. And I think that's, really, really awesome. So I guess my next question for you would be is like, where do you see the future of the cannabis industry heading?
Well, you know what? There's a lot of people that are kind of confused as far as where we even actually are or how we got here. And like I told you, there was a lot of things coming into cannabis that I didn't understand. So it's really easy not to have that understanding, training background. And what people need to understand is that when we legalized marijuana, we came in talking about its health benefits. And we right. And so we got in through the door talking about it being medical.
Yeah.
You can't all of a sudden say, oh, just kidding. Right. Yeah, just kidding. It's great. Right. Yeah. So we still have to follow that path, and it's still medical. And so you can't just suddenly say, oh, well, codeine has been being taken by people for 5 years now, so it just isn't dangerous anymore. That's not how it works. So we can't go from a class 1 scheduled narcotic or drug to descheduled. It doesn't work that way. Like, you have to kind of step down. So the next step is making a class 3 scheduled drug, which would be something like over the counter. It's still something that you can't just buy randomly. You're still going to get carded for it. It puts on kind of that same level as like cigarettes, where it's still
not
a controlled.
Advil just yet.
Yeah, it's not Advil yet, but it's still controlled, but you can go to the pharmacy and get it behind the counter kind of idea, right? And you just have to be able to show the credibility that you're of age and all those bits. So it puts it more on the alcohol level, or like cigarettes or something like that, where it's no longer considered dangerous per se, but it's still something that it's being watched.
Right.
And making it a class 3 may or may not allow it to pass through the borders. There's still a lot of things, because it's the first time any of this has been done, that we won't be sure of until it happens. And there's going to be a lot of legislation and a lot of laws and rules and everything else that will come with it. But it's not something that we can go from 100 to 0 on overnight. You had all these people when Biden talked about descheduling it that were just, oh yeah, you'll be able to buy weed at the corner store tomorrow. Yeah. It's not going to be that fast. It's not going to be that easy. We're still talking about years away, no matter what happens. So the next step is going to be to take it to a class 3 scheduled drug. And it's going to be changing a lot of the ways that we interact with it. And a lot of the regulations about it. I think that once it gets changed, it will open up banking, and it's going to open up a lot of federal resources. And then, I think that there's going to be a lot of lobbying about taxes and things like that. And I think some of the taxes will come down, and it's going to kind of stabilize a little bit. Yeah, hopefully. Those are my goals. That's my prediction. I've read my crystal ball. That's where I think we're going.
Awesome. The Nostradamus, Richard, is able to predict all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. So Richard, to quickly finish off, we have this really cool segment where we ask the previous guest what question they have for the next guest. They don't know who you are, so
Yeah.
This is very much an anonymous question, but it's a cool way we can have engagement between past and present guests. So, question from Andrew Rodriguez from Elevated Herb. He asks, "What is your reasoning for being in the industry, and where do you see yourself in 5 years?"
Well, my reasoning for being in the industry is I think that the industry itself is still really young. Mm-hmm. And because of that, a lot of the choices I'm able to make at my level have a lot of impact, right? I think the SOPs, the things that we're writing and doing to kind of stabilize and create the market, in a lot of other retail, there are already rules. And some of them we just know inherently. But in cannabis, none of that's set yet. And so I think that it's really about being able to make a mark and make some changes and help create that stability and create something really fun that I actually have some say in and some power over. And then kind of where I'm expecting to be in 5 years is I really want to be in part of the industry where we're able to take the demonization out of cannabis and make it more of everyone's daily lives, right? Like, I would really like to see it go from being something where we had the war on drugs and they made it feel real ugly and they made it feel like, we're all in some back alley next to the garbage can making a drug deal, right? To
open up the trench coat saying, "Hey, you want some?"
Absolutely, right. to it being where, like, our grandmother can come into a dispensary because she's having trouble with her arthritis, right, and wants to try something that's not a medication, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a drug, and wants to explore different avenues. Or, I would love to see bakeries that have dosed, breads or something that you can go to a dinner party and it being as socially acceptable as a bottle of wine.
Right. That's awesome. That's great. What question would you have for the next guest?
I think my question for the next episode would be, how do you play a role in the bigger picture of cannabis's future?
Ooh, okay. You're not letting this one get off easy. All right, we'll see what they have to say.
All right.
So Richard, please go ahead, plug all your stuff. Please let us know all about Vibe by California. Just, say everything.
We're a vertically integrated company, so that means that we have our own brand. We own the Hype brand of cannabis. We've had 3 major farms and an indoor farm, as well as 3 brands. Like I said, we have Hype, we have Lit. I think those are the only, I can't tell you about the third one. Have to keep it on the hush, but there's a third one coming. We have stores in Sacramento, Stockton, Redding, Ukiah, Palm Springs, and Portland at the moment, with a lot more coming. Again, more stuff I can't talk about, but yep, hopefully you'll see us in a city near you soon. The one thing that we always hang our hat on is that we have one of the largest menus and selections at some of the best prices in town. So definitely come in, see us. We'd love to see you, and we'd love to show you what the difference is between shopping with us and your local dispensary.
Awesome. Well, Richard, it was an absolute joy. Thanks for hopping on the Dispensary Marketing Podcast once again. And for everyone else who's listening, I'm your host, Brandon Kwan, founder of Cannabis Marketing and your host of the Dispensary Marketing Podcast. And until next time, I will talk to you guys later. See you.
Thanks, Brandon. Bye.